Spring is finally here, and my favorite part of the spring is the perfect running weather, but getting new gear might just be a close second. Once it gets too warm for your winter layers, that makes it the perfect time to pick out some new shoes and apparel. Lynn Bourque is the owner of the Runner Shop specialty store in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and joins me in today's show to talk about what's popular in running gear right now and how to pick out gear that you're gonna love for many years or training cycles. There's something that just feels good about having a bouncy new pair of shoes or racing kit that fits perfectly and makes you look like you could run a sub 4-minute mile. Congrats if anyone listening here actually can run a sub 4-minute mile, but I'll happily settle for feeling great on the start line of a race. So with that, let's get into my conversation with Lynn. I'm joined by Lynn Bourque from the Runner Shop to talk all things running and apparel. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Definitely, I'm excited to have you on the show as someone who's been in the store multiple times and even had the pleasure to participate in some races you put on. So thank you on both fronts.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I'm so glad that you have come into the store. And of course, it's always a pleasure to have you showing off your running talent at our races.
I do appreciate it. And so right now, as we're recording this, we're kind of just starting to feel some spring weather. I know you did a bit of an earlier marathon with Tokyo. How are you feeling after that? And are you getting ready for the spring season too?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, I did do the Tokyo Marathon on March the 2nd, and that was definitely felt very early. It was, especially with our crazy weather in February. It was, kind of a struggle to get through some of it. And then end up in Tokyo. And I think by the race, by the time the race had finished, it was about 18 degrees. So it was definitely, I really had to pull out some summer gear for that. It was kind of funny. Before I went, I was sponsored by ASICS to run the race, and they had given me a couple of different outfits, one of which was a singlet, which was pretty much paper thin. And I remember saying to Michael, one of my colleagues in the store, oh, I would never wear this. I mean, this is like for, this is for like a July heat wave. Well, guess what I wore? Because when I got there, it was, it was just kind of crazy hot. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to be too hot in this and too hot in that. So I ended up wearing sort of like the paper thin outfit. It was. Well, I also did one of those things that you're never supposed to do, which is don't race in something that you've never put on. And I did actually shred a little skin with it. So, I should take my own advice on that one. But anyway, coming back, I'm just feeling now, like sort of 6 weeks afterwards, that I'm sort of starting to get back into the rhythm of running again. I took a couple weeks off, and then after you take a couple weeks off, you feel so sluggish getting back. So we have a team from the store going out to run the Cabot Trail Relay Race at the end of May. So I'm just trying to get myself geared up for that.
Amazing. Well, happy to hear you're getting back into it slowly. And when you say it was super hot in Tokyo, I've never run that marathon. Bearing in mind a lot of our listeners are from the States and going to be operating on, more familiar with Fahrenheit scale than Celsius. How hot are we talking?
Okay, 18 is probably about, I would say, let's see, what is that? Low 70s? Low to mid 70s? Yeah, so it certainly wasn't like scorching hot or anything, but it was warm enough. I think I heard that later in the race they ran out of water cups, and I felt a bit guilty about that because I was definitely dumping water over my head as I was going through the different water stations. Unfortunately, it never occurred to me that they only had a limited number of cups, but yeah, so I think when you get into the 70s, you're definitely running in some warmer weather.
Definitely makes it feel warmer. And I will say, even just naming the weather in the imperial system always makes it feel warmer to me compared to Celsius. I don't know what that is psychologically.
And I think it's always a little bit more difficult too when you are coming from a colder climate. For people listening, before I went to Tokyo, Toronto was having quite a bad set of snowstorms. So as a matter of fact, I would say for the 2 weeks before I went to Tokyo, I don't know if I even ran outside because I was having a little bit of knee trouble, and falling over snowbanks didn't actually do it any favors. So, and I was a little bit worried about slipping on the ice. So I moved my runs inside onto the treadmill. So you're definitely going from, let's say -10, which would be about 30 degrees, or into the 20s, I would say, Fahrenheit. And then you're going up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's quite the jump.
So, under normal circumstances, if you were going to practice with your race kit, would you do it indoors, or what's typically your strategy when your training weather is dramatically different from what you're going to be racing in?
I think I would try it indoors actually, because it's like the littlest things can cause you problems, and you just never think about it when you look at you look at the item. For example, the thing that bothered me in about the singlet that I was wearing was, as I got more and more sweaty and it was hotter and stuff, my arm swing, I was like kind of I was rubbing the seam under the armpit, and it just, yeah, I mean, after 42 kilometers of doing that and in the heat, it started to just sort of act like a bit of a razor, and it was just like cutting into the arm, and I could I could feel it. Like, I definitely was thought to myself somewhere in the 30s, of the race, like the 30-kilometer marks or whatever, 34 kilometers, that I've thought, oh boy, we're going to pay for this one later. So I do think it's wise, yeah. And I find sometimes with shorts, this can definitely be something that bothers people as well. How the seams around the bottom of the shorts, if you're wearing half tights, like I typically wear half tights, so how that seam sits, and whether it's nice and snug to the leg, and the length of the short can actually play quite a part in it. So let's just say, like in women's shorts, you can have like the little ones, like you see, like the Nike Pro ones or whatever that the girls wear. I mean, those would be like a 3-inch short, and then you can go 5-inch, which would be in the mid thigh, or maybe a little bit longer, a 6 or 7-inch, which would come down a little closer to the knee. So, like for me, if I have that 5-inch, it potentially can kind of get, once again, it can kind of like rub. I'm not, and unfortunately, I don't weigh 120 pounds. So I think, yeah, just the shape of your body is something that you have to really consider when you buy apparel for yourself, and for men as well. So yeah, so things like that, the seams around the bottom, the seams around the waist for men. Does the singlet rub against the nipples, or under the arms? These tend to be the typical things. And of course, for women, one of the big things is the bra line as well. That is definitely something that women really struggle with, and get a lot of cuts and that sort of thing. And you'd get in the shower afterwards and whoo-hoo. Yeah.
I've been there, especially in races in the rain. I find the chafing
Oh,
is
yeah.
just god awful. So
Yeah.
Body Glide is a lifesaver. I honestly, I wish they were a sponsor of ours, because it
Yeah.
is definitely an essential.
Yeah, it definitely is an essential. One of the women in our run club gave me a little trick. She's got the like KT tape, and she puts it sort of just in between, like the breasts, like on the bra line, where you tend to get the most rubbing. And she just puts that KT tape and then wears the bra over top of it. And I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Yeah, that sounds smart.
Yeah.
Um, Starting on the apparel side, in terms of kind of fit and finding what works for you, you've brought up a number of challenges that are hard to test in store. Like, you're probably not going to walk into a specialty store and start, you know, taking KT tape and sticking it to your
Yeah,
body.
that's
So what do you,
right. Yeah.
yes. So what do you look for to actually know apparel is going to work well for you?
That's a good question. I think one of the key things is to be honest about your size and wear apparel that actually fits. I think people sometimes wish they were a little bit smaller than they are. And it's just like how we say in the shoes, like, don't look at the number on the side of the box. Okay. It's just like, let's just try the shoes on. And if they fit and they feel right, then, because we'll often get people who say, oh God, no, 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 I've always been a size 7. I can't be a size 7.5. When, of course, and once again, with the shoes, what happens is that although people think that they are a certain size, all the shoe brands don't get together at like an annual meeting and say, okay, this is what the size 7's going to fit like, right? So there's so many different factors that go into what a shoe actually feels like on your foot. And I would say the same with apparel. So one is, you could be, oh, I'm always a small. Well, I mean, a Brooks small and an Asics small actually may just not be the same, for sure, right? When one is, yeah, they start off in two different markets, and and there's, I mean, just to be truthful about it, I mean, there's sizing differences. So a small is not always exactly the same, across the brand. So I think you've got to be open-minded about it. And then above and beyond, actually getting the right size, I think that having a feel for the fabrics, for sure. Like, it's not so much that everything that is expensive is the best. Not to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but let's just say, like, if you're looking at a brand like Satisfy, let's say, I mean, it's really nice apparel. It feels really good, but I mean, there is a certain amount of money that's being spent on sort of a fashion statement, let's say, or trend or whatever. So the reason I bring that up is I think that when you go lower in price, the fabrics are not quite as sort of moisture wicking. They might, the way that they make the seams in the factory, like, it's all sort of about, how much money has gone into is invested in it. So if that makes any sense. So, okay, a good example of this would be a brand like New Balance, let's say. So I think actually things have changed a little bit, but they used to do it where they had different lines. So you would have, like, it was called like the Accelerate line, and then they had the Impact line, and now they have the RC line. So the Accelerate was their entry level. So a t-shirt, let's say, in the Accelerate line, maybe $35. And in the Impact line, it's $50. And now, I mean, actually the RC's taken over from Impact, but just for argument's sake, we'll just say, and then in the RC line, it's $80. So there is definitely pricing changes that have happened, but I do think that looking at the price tag of something actually is, especially in a run specialty store, can be an indicator of the quality of the clothing. So I think sometimes people are kind of looking they want to, have a bit more of a bargain, which is completely understandable. And that's why, maybe going for the middle line, is a good bet. Yeah, because then you start to question yourself, okay, like, do I need a $90 singlet or a $100 singlet? You look at it and it's like there's so little involved, right, in that singlet. It seems like, well, and I definitely see this in the store. People come in and they're aghast, at the cost, because there's nothing to it. But I guess in a way, that's the whole point, is that they've managed to make a material that is so breezy and moisture wicking, and just feels like silk on your body, that it costs lots of money.
Yeah, and I will say that that premium model, there's a lot of costs that go into it, so I get it from the side of the retailers, but also it used to be almost more bimodal, where you had sort of your cheap clothing that you might just get at your outlet store, and then you had the ultra premium, super thin. I find there's more brands now that cater to different niches, whether you're looking for something super fashionable or something that's gonna just be really comfortable and last long, or something that's really designed for racing and just going to be ultra premium, light and breathable. And it's
Yeah.
kind of nice to have those options.
Oh, it really is. Yeah. And I mean, I find that when you feel that more premium product, that's when you really realize like how big a difference there is in these fabrics. Another good example of that is socks. So, I mean, I would say, oh, at least, I don't know. I feel like it's like 3 out of 10 at least of people who come into the store have wear those like Puma socks that you get at Costco, 3 in a pack. Okay, and no dissing on Costco or anything like that, but it's when you look at a sock in our store that's $24 for one sock. Sometimes people do have sticker shock for sure, but there is such a difference in the socks. Like I mean, the biggest thing is that there's no cotton. So I think that this is a really important thing for all listeners to know. You should never wear apparel for running that has cotton in it. Because unless it's, like a casual run. But I mean, when you think about like Rocky, going up the stairs and stuff and, sweating in the shirt, that is not what you want. Okay. And the reason Rocky is sweating like that is because cotton is a plant and it loves moisture. So it just holds on to that moisture. It's not going anywhere, right? It doesn't have any technology in the fabrics or weaves or anything like that are going to pull that moisture away from you. Whereas if you compare that to let's just go back to the RC, let's just say from New Balance, but really any of the brands, CLA or Brooks makes fantastic apparel. They have, like, if you actually look closely at the weave, let's say, of the shirts and the shorts, you'll see little they're like little sort of air kind of holes, I guess. It actually does kind of look like holes in the fabrics, and that's actually for the sweat to actually channel through the fabric and out, so the air takes that away. So anyway, the same thing with socks could be said. Like if you're wearing those Puma socks that have cotton in them, your feet are sweating in the socks, right? There's nowhere for the moisture to go. The cotton doesn't like hold its shape. And, if you're buying a brand like Steigen or Features, Belega, these are all polyester blends that, once again, most of them have some sort of like elastane in them or lycra in them that will make sure that the sock holds its structure. So it just feels so much better on your foot. Like I like to have.
Yeah, it's night and day.
Oh, it's night and day, yeah. So I like to wear like super, super thin socks. So the Steigen socks are fabulous for that. And we recommend those also to all of our track athletes. At the Runner Shop, we sell a lot of track and field spikes. And in those shoes, often you'll see the professionals go barefoot. And a lot of the kids will wear a sock, but of course when they come into the store to try the spike on, they've got, either those Puma socks on or they've got, those white cotton socks or whatever. So, we sell a lot of the Steigen socks that go out the door with the spikes. So sorry, I sort of got sidetracked off clothing, but it does all sort of work in conjunction. That's looking at the different fabrics and sort of, getting what you pay for and, just sort of saying how much you need. Like there's one thing also I think that happens a lot, and that is that especially with newer runners, it's almost like there's this thing where they feel that they got to earn like the good apparel or the good shoes, right? Well, I'm just a new runner. But I mean, the thing is like, you're a runner. Like if you're running, you're a runner. And you shouldn't, you don't have to go out in, a pair of old, gym shorts from 10 years ago and a cotton t-shirt just because you're a new runner. As a matter of fact, you should treat yourself and, get the best. It'll make you more keen to get out the door.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think even just starting a new season, it's super exciting when you have that fresh pair of shoes or, the new racing singlet that you get to try on for your fast workouts. It's pretty motivating.
Yes, it is. It really is. Yeah, I recently just on we have some on apparel in the store, and they had given me some, and it is just unbelievable. Like the difference in these fabrics, it's just so wonderful. I mean, I know it is expensive, but it is, boy, it's a treat. And the thing is, you can always maybe ask somebody to give it to you for your birthday.
Yeah, I will say I never appreciated socks quite the way I do as a runner. I think it's still nice to have a comfy pair of socks when you're walking around, but it's just a completely different experience
Yeah.
compared to when you're wearing, those crappy cotton stuff you got on
Oh,
Amazon for two
oh,
bucks.
oh, yeah, it really is. I find I'm a terrible snob about it too because I'll get socks at Christmas, and I just can't wear anything but running socks.
And I'm personally devastated whenever you get a hole in your favorite pair of socks. It's terrible.
It is, yeah. So just to kind of circle back to things that people should be thinking about when they're looking at apparel. So like, yes, I mean, being aware that the different cost does represent different types of fabric and different qualities in the fabric, and making sure that you're buying it the right size as well. Because if you went the other way and it's too big, I mean, it can also be, that the seams can sort of rub against you that way as well. I think another thing that is worth noting is just like in shorts in particular, like what suits your body type and what you feel comfortable with. It's funny, we're celebrating our store's 50th anniversary this year, and I've been looking.
Oh, congrats.
Yes, thank you. So I've been looking back through the archives, and it's kind of funny looking back to 1975. Wow, I mean, these guys were in almost nothing. Like they have singlets on, and Jerome Drayton, who held the Canadian men's marathon record for 34 years, I think it was. There's pictures of him. They had like a singlet that was basically looked like it was made, it would like of netting almost. Like it was, I mean, back then they wouldn't have had all the different like polyester blends that we have now, but so they were wearing, like very, very little. So it's sort of interesting because I think right now people tend to wear like the half tight is quite popular. And you don't see that many guys out there in like super short shorts or like see-through singlets. But anyway, so back in 1975, you did. So anyway,
Lynn,
I was just going to say,
yeah,
so about the length of
sorry,
short,
go ahead.
right? So for men, there's also 3 inch, which would be what we describe as like a split short, which you will often see like typically you might see your sprinters in those, or people who are running around a track, or marathoners, of course. But I mean, a short that's that short is probably going to be on somebody who's fairly slight and is maybe young. And then the most typical length we sell for men is a 5 inch. So that would sort of be mid thigh, and then 7 inch if you want it to go down a little bit further, just above the knee. So I think that knowing that those are the standard lengths, and that what you feel most comfortable in is important to know as well. I mean, most guys do go for the 5 inch, but if you're, maybe if you're a little heavier, and it kind of rides up or doesn't quite sit properly, you might want to go to a slightly longer one. And that's exactly the same with the women. The 3, the 5, the 7. Like you can do it in a regular short, or we can do it in what I describe as the half tights. So the tighter, some people might think of them as like biking shorts, without the chamois on the bum. But like I like to actually wear mine a little bit longer, like sort of just above the knee. I just sort of feel most comfortable that way because they don't move. And as I don't know, just as you get older, things move on you. So and you don't want the short to. I think back to the days when I wore those little 3-inch shorts. But I do think it's important to sort of have an idea of what suits your body type, and also just like what you feel comfortable in.
Yeah, 100%. I actually wanted to specifically ask about short legs, so I'm glad you went there. But I was going to add too, I think there is also a weather aspect in terms of like how warm is it going to be. I tend to like things a bit shorter then, but also functionally, I've had some split shorts in the past that are even like 2.5 inches, which is super
Yes.
short.
Yeah.
But I found as I got into like half marathon and marathons and started wearing a fuel belt, it's so short to the point where sometimes your belt starts like getting towards your legs, and it's maybe
That's
not optimal.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that is actually that's a really valuable thing to talk about. Is that the longer the short, the more you can stick in it. So in a marathon, that's another reason why I like the half tight is because they, especially on the women's, they have pockets down the side of the leg. So you can shove your gels and everything in the side. Whereas if you're wearing a 3 inch shorts, you don't. There's nowhere to put anything, for sure, right? So as you say, like you might have like a spy belts or something around your waist. So I think that's another thing. Like a lot of people now like to definitely run with their phones. And that's another reason maybe for the popularity of the half tight is that there's somewhere to put your phone, and it does fit nice and snug too. So you can just put it in there, and I mean, I don't tend to put my phone there. There's usually what we call like a lumbar pocket, so at the very back of and particularly on the men's shorts, you'll find that because I would say they've kind of been slow in putting the side pockets on men's half tights. So it's always been, kind of along the back. And then, of course, if you have that 5 inch short, it's along the back as well. So the phone can, it can kind of drag it down. Yeah, so that's something to consider too. Like, what is it that you need to actually carry with you? And you might want to have, different shorts for different reasons, right? If you're running a race, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I've got to go, okay, I need a gel every, 30 minutes, and where am I going to put 8 gels and that kind of thing. So you need like some way to carry it. And yeah, those half tights are awesome, right? 3 in one pocket, 3 in the other pocket, and on the side legs and in the back. But I'm not going to be doing that when I'm just out like going for an 8K run around the block or whatever. Well, not around the block, but just a training run or something, right? And so I might just be because I don't need to carry anything. I might just put on my just a blousey kind of pair of shorts that I feel comfortable in.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for kind of an easy trot where you're carrying around a lot of gels, I tend to kind of like putting on a vest rather than stuffing a bunch of stuff in your shorts
Oh
anyways,
yeah.
because
Hmm.
it just doesn't drag as much. And at that point, you're typically bringing along like liquids and maybe even keys and phones to go with it.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot to stick in your shorts.
Yeah, it is. That's true. Yeah. It's interesting though. In Tokyo, they did not allow you to have a vest, so a hydration vest. So it was very interesting because in Berlin, they encouraged you to bring your own water, and if you did bring your own water, they actually had a table that was specifically set up with like little kind of like water jugs where they actually filled up your water carrier. So at the 11th hour in Berlin, I actually decided to do that because I typically run with like a little handheld. And I just, like sometimes in marathons and I just like to sip away at water as opposed to sort of blast into those stations. So I know it's kind of like oftentimes I would have probably advised people not to carry water, but anyway, for that day, I decided to carry my own, and it was a great decision that I didn't have to go into those water stations. But then Tokyo forbid you to have water. So it's interesting, like the world majors are not on the same page with this sort of stuff. Obviously they, in countries and for their own security, they make their own decisions. So just kind of flipping back to that. So you may find that, in one race, you actually do need the shorts to shove all the stuff in. Because there's nowhere else to put it. And, in another race, it's going to all be on course. So you feel comfortable with that. So you don't have to carry anything.
That's a good note. Like for people buying spring clothing now, it's good to think ahead all the way to if you're doing a fall marathon, whether you're doing Berlin or New York or a local
Yeah.
marathon, check
Yeah.
out the rules and what they allow because that may influence your clothing choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Another thing I was thinking too about, just, if you're sort of planning for race day, let's say you're traveling and, you're not really sure exactly what's going to happen. I think that I think any investment you make in apparel is going to, be a good one, right? So I think it's like sometimes I'll find that people, they're thinking specifically for that day, but I mean, good apparel will also last for years. So
100%.
yeah, like, I mean, I have a pair of Segoy, well, I have several pairs of Segoy tights that, I mean, I don't know how long I've had these things, but I mean, there are some brands where the stuff will just never, like, not disintegrate, but I mean, it'll never go bad. It's so you think, oh, do I want to spend like $140 on a pair of winter tights? But the value to that is that you will wear those winter tights for 10 years if you want to, right? Like they're well made, and whether it's Brooks or New Balance or Segoy, the North Face even, it's a really good investment. So I think that can be said also for just going into a race. Like if you're not sure if you're going to want to have a shirt or a singlet kind of thing, it's a good investment to have both. I mean, I know, like, I'm also saying, oh, well, have to spend lots of money, and God knows the shoes cost so much you can't afford, anything else. But I think it's a good way of kind of looking at it, is that run apparel, it's like if you're comfortable, isn't that priceless, right? Like, I mean, you don't want to like not spend, the extra $20 or something, on something that you maybe should have had or wanted to have, and then be uncomfortable in something else.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd much rather spend money on, two or three really good quality products that are going to last than having to buy new ones every year.
Yeah.
You kind of got into shoes, and I definitely want to make sure we have enough time to cover shoes as well. But one last question just on the style, because I think we talked a little bit about short length, but when it comes to socks, I think that's controversial too. Sort of, you have everything from your no-show socks all the way up to
Right.
your
Yeah,
almost knee height. What do
that's
you wear,
right.
and what do you think is kind of in right now?
Oh, wow. I think that's the crew sock has definitely, made a statement. Like, we sell all kinds of them, I certainly would say that it varies on the season. So in the summer, we'll tend to sell more of what we call a tab sock, so like a no-show sock. And then in the winter, I mean, you definitely want to get into a crew or a quarter, because if the snow is kind of coming up underneath your pants, or it's cold, I think the crew is kind of it's definitely like a look, and I think I think it looks great, because you can really the cool thing is that there's so many different like colors and styles you can get in the crew, and then it's a little bit of personality, right? So you have to be kind of brave to put them on, but then they do actually look pretty cool. But then you can't wear it too much, because your tan lines will be terrible. So
I think every summer I give up on not having tan lines pretty early. It's
yeah,
awful. You have kind of the one around where the hat is on the head, and then the watch
yeah.
tan line, and then the socks. There's no getting around it.
No, there isn't. But I kind of like it. Like, the other day I went out and I have a pair of Steigans that are like a bright sort of yellow, they've got flowers all over them. And it's more like a crew length. And at this time of the year, like, I went out the other day and I did have on like half tights, so just sort of above the knee. It was like 6 degrees or something. So I thought, well, if I have a longer sock, I'm almost like practically only my knees are exposed. Right? So I think that's something too, is that like it's really can be very weather dependent. And in the summer, like, oftentimes, I mean, it's just so hot, like, you want to have as little as possible. And obviously in the winter, it's the opposite, where like, people are concerned, especially if you're going to be in like a regular shoe. Then I think that as opposed to a Gore-Tex shoe, let's say, having like more going on in the sock department is definitely going to keep your feet warmer, for sure. Yeah. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's talk shoes. I think this is probably my favorite part and maybe what most
Okay.
listeners will be looking forward to. So, if you've got a runner who's in the position where they're coming off their spring marathon, their shoes are maybe a little bit more worn out, what do you point them to first and how do they pick out new shoes? Do you tell them to get the same brand, to try on different shoes? What's your words of wisdom for everyone listening?
Okay, so they've already run the race and now they're ready for a refresh. Is that the is that the scenario?
Yeah, I mean, you
Like,
tell me who are most of the runners coming this time of year, but I'm
okay.
envisioning you're getting a lot of people who are probably looking to refresh their warm up, or sorry, their wardrobe as they get into the spring
Oh
summer
yeah.
season.
Oh right. Yes. Well, I think that let's just sort of use the scenario of we're getting into races. So we're outside more. We may or may not be doing a race. Typically what I will ask people is like what are they doing with their running? Are they planning a race? Are they now starting like a marathon build? Are they, just kind of going out and running casually, 5Ks kind of thing. So I think what people are doing in the shoe is always the first question we ask, because there's a lot of different shoes, and on the design table, they all have different purposes. So I think that everybody, if you can, it would be fabulous if you could have at least two pairs of shoes. Because there are big differences in the shoes, and we don't necessarily have to go to like a carbon race day shoe. That might actually be a third shoe, to be honest. Although I do think it's also wise to remember that these shoes, they're not gold. They don't need to sit on a shelf and like not be touched except for the day. It's just that the carbon shoes, the race day shoes, that we often refer to as elite, and not because you have to be elite to wear them, but because the brands actually call them that. So the endorphin elite, the fuel cell comp elite, they kind of give them that word just so that they can separate their categories. So there's another category that we refer to as speed, which maybe come out of the Magic Speed and the Endorphin Speed from Saucony, and that is more of it's kind of a bit more approachable, and you can definitely be using that as like an everyday training shoe. So the price point is also a bit more reasonable. So let's just say the Endorphin Speed is like 220, and the Pro is oh boy, no, I caught myself here. Well, the race day shoes, the Elite, I mean, they can go up to 350, right? So we're usually talking.
I think in Canadian dollars, right?
Oh, sorry, yes, in Canadian dollars, yes, yes, I forgot, yes, yeah, in Canadian dollars. So I guess
Yeah, because I think the speed is probably something around like 150, 160 American.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but maybe 160 or 170, yeah. So for that reason, I also think that it's just you're not spending quite as much money, because if you're going to use it as an everyday trainer, then you want to be able to use it for a little while, right? So
Yeah.
like what I like is to have a shoe that is just like is good mileage. Like here, that might be like $180 or $200 shoe. So in the States, like, the New Balance 880, the Brooks Ghost, the Asics Cumulus, the Asics Nova Blast. These are all key models from all the different brands. I believe in the States there may be like 150 or 140 or 150. And those shoes are great. They're going to give you a great life expectancy on the shoe. Something I think that is very important in shoes to consider is the outsole of the shoe. So, the Brooks Ghost, for example, great outsole, is going to last, right? So that's your bread and butter. I refer to those as the Honda Civics of the running shoe world. They're really going to do their thing. But admittedly, there's shoes that are way more fun. No knock against them, but with the super shoes, what's happened is they're starting to use those foams, the Piva foams, the supercritical foams in other shoes, and those are just, it makes them super fun, it makes them super bouncy, and that's why I think you should have two shoes. You should have a shoe that's just like an everyday workhorse, and then you should have a shoe that has something else going on with it. So I might suggest like the Endorphin Speed, the New Balance Super Comp Trainer. I've been running in the Hoka Skyward X, which I really love. It's some of them have a plate of some kind in them. It may not be like a full carbon plate, but like, for example, in the Endorphin Speed, it's like a nylon plate. It's not as aggressive as it would be in the Elite shoes. So you can wear it for, if you're weak, basically, you've got, let's say Tuesday, Wednesday, you're just doing your runs, your regular runs. Thursday night's your speed work. Sunday's your long run. I think that shoe should come out on a Thursday. I think it should, personally, I think it should come out on the Sunday too, because one thing we do know about these shoes as well is they really aid with recovery. So you're going to just feel better all round. It's going to make your long run way more fun. And it's also you're going to feel a lot better afterwards. So, so I think that basically that's the kind of thing I would suggest is, first we're thinking, what am I going to do in the shoe? And then secondly, okay, if I'm training for 10K, half marathon, I'm running 40 or 50K a week or more, I might want to have two shoes.
And you mentioned the Skyward X, but what's the other pair of shoe you're training in right now?
Well, because I own a running shoe store,
Or the five other pairs of shoes?
I have every shoe that you could possibly. I have so many shoes. Well, I ran the Tokyo Marathon in the Metaspeed Edge, which I loved. And I am doing actually a fair bit of my just sort of daily mileage in the Nova Blast, which I really.
And this is the Paris, or which edition of the Edge?
This is Paris, yes. Yeah. But I would say my sort of go-to shoe is actually the New Balance Fuel Cell Comp Trainer. I've been wearing that for quite a while, and really love that shoe. It's I just love the pop that I get in that. At this very moment, I have a pair of Glide Rides on my feet from Asics. So those are probably my sort of key shoes. But I mean, everybody's got different preferences. Like Michael, who is my like shoe dog in the store, he is a huge fan of the Glycerin Max from Brooks. Loves that shoe and really loves the Super Blast as well from Asics. For myself, I find that like the big stack height in some of these new Super Max shoes is I don't pick my feet up enough to actually get off. Like I'm falling. I'm in fear of falling over in some of those shoes. But I think if you have like a sort of a lighter step, or I mean, they're super popular and people really love them.
So something like the Super Blast, it's not a carbon-plated racer, and yet still definitely in the upper tier of shoe. I think it's something like
Mhm.
280, 300 Canadian, and well
Yeah.
over 200 American. And
Yeah.
yet it seems like most retailers can't keep it on the store shelves. What do you think it is that makes a shoe like that so popular?
Oh, wow. Well, I think it's a really good shoe. I also think that there's a lot of hype behind it right now. Like, I think a lot of influencers really like it, and, there's definitely some popularity. Asics has worked a little bit on a scarcity model as well. So, and that's kind of worked out for them. So there are not enough of them to go around, and that makes people want them even more because they can't get them. And it really is a great shoe. Like, Asics has done a lot of really great things, with innovation, with the foams, and it is a super bouncy shoe that feels, these shoes they feel so comfortable, and yet when you think about something like, let's just compare it to the Nimbus. Okay, so the Asics Nimbus is a very, very soft shoe. So if you like the feel of a shoe that is kind of almost pillowy, let's say, and I sometimes refer to it as being kind of like a Lexus because it's not just the foams themselves, but it's the interior of the shoe. Like it's the way that the cushioning on the inside wraps around your heel and how the tongue feels as you pull up and do the laces, that kind of thing. So there's, sort of a lot going on there. But if you think about, let's just say, you're jumping up and down on a feather bed and you're trying to touch the ceiling. So, well, the bed feels pretty nice underneath you, but it's hard to touch the ceiling because the bed is so soft, you can't like get up off it. Now, if you were jumping up and down on a trampoline, it would be a lot easier to touch the ceiling. You wouldn't necessarily want to sleep on the trampoline like you would on the feather bed, but it's definitely going to bounce you up to that ceiling. So I think that's a good way of sort of thinking about shoes as well. So the Nimbus is definitely a feather bed, but the Super Blast is more like the trampoline. And even though it's soft, the foams are different. And you just, so you get that softness, but it's just a different, it's because of the way that the technology and the foams, it just has this lift off that's really, really nice. For people who really aren't that familiar with it, there is a whole new category of shoes. So as if we didn't have enough new categories of shoes, now we have another one. And that's what I referred to as like the Supermax shoes. And that would be like the Glycerin Max. And they're just like how I was saying, well, you can identify like the top tier race day shoe from the sort of more mid-tier, training shoe by the fact that they call it elite or pro as opposed to speed. Well, in these new Max shoes, they use the word Max as well, like the Hyperion Max and the Glycerin Max, and there's lots of Max going on right now. So I would definitely put the Super Blast kind of in the Max category. The Nova Blast is like the kid sister. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, but I think that it's just it is a really good shoe, and then there's just sort of other like social things that are going on around the shoes themselves that are adding to the hype.
Yeah, I think the trampoline metaphor is a good one. I've heard that a lot, but it's definitely that feeling you get. It's just fun to run in, and it's bouncy. Turning to more a style perspective, what do you think people are looking to more? And I'll say personally, one thing that I'm really excited about is just the number of collabs that you see between shoe brands and apparel brands. Like I know at one point your store had the Chele or Ciele rather,
That's right. Yeah.
and Puma
Puma.
collaboration, which
Yeah.
was a really good
Mhm.
looking shoe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I was reading an article the other day where there are a lot more collabs going on, and so I think coming into the next year or two, you're going to see a lot more of that. I think it's really cool. I think it's a little bit niche, to be honest. And sort of, if I can just sort of like flip back to what we were talking about like apparel and just like actually like buying something that fits and is the right size and actually performs for you. I think that it's like I think it's really sort of cool and fashion forward to have these collabs for sure. And people want something different, right? And it's neat. But I think, to be honest, I think it's a small part of the running community. And I think that we want those things definitely, because it's often the things that are kind of out there that at least just like walking, the let's say the fashion shows of Milan or whatever. I've never seen anybody actually walk down the street in any of the things you actually see, in the fashion show. Maybe they do. Like, I obviously don't move in those circles, but what happens is it kind of filters down into everyday eventually. right? Like if that makes sense. So that's where I see like great value in all these collabs and stuff is they're cool, and you've got to have like these. You got to have these people out like trying new things and sort of throwing stuff up, and because eventually it'll come down to the mere mortals, and something neat is going to come out of it. An example of this might be something like we have normal trail shoes in our store, and that's a collaboration with Camper. Now, I have to admit, I had never really heard of Camper before I had we started carrying the shoes. But for those of you who are familiar with Camper or aren't, I mean, it is a really like out there sort of crazy like shoe company and innovator. When I ran the Berlin Marathon in September, and I had an opportunity to go to a Camper store, and they actually have some shoes that are just, I don't know what they would even call them, like just fashion, like not suggestions, but they're just trying stuff out, and this stuff is crazy, like absolutely crazy, right? Like I guess Berlin would be the place to see it. But so once again, I mean, I don't see too many people walking around in this kind of thing that I saw in that store, but I think that, eventually it kind of does filter down a little bit and something comes out of that. So I don't know if I don't know if that is a very good answer or it's a too long-winded an answer, but that's sort of the way I see it anyway.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, but sorry, I'm just gonna cut there for a sec, Lynn. I'm getting a bit of an echoing. Are you hearing that on your end?
No.
No, you're not hearing? Okay. All right. I'll go back and pick up where we left off, and hopefully it resolves itself. I do see the echo cancellation is checked, so hopefully that's just on my end. As long as you're not hearing it, then it won't be
No.
picked up in the audio,
No. No.
because that's what comes through is it's separate audio. So
Okay.
we should be good.
I hope
Right.
I'm not stumbling over my answers here too much.
No, don't worry. It's great. It's conversational, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to go back and kind of comment on your previous answer, and Jeremy, our editor, can just
I'm
kind
gonna
of
grab
roll it
some
right
water.
in.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. My bubblies. Okay.
Love bubbly.
Yeah.
All right. You good if I get started again?
Mhm.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to pick up right here. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of that sort of trickle down with these collabs into something that's maybe a little bit more mainstream. Just curious in terms of how that plays out for the average consumer who's maybe not purchasing the collabs directly. Do you see that in terms of, is it the style? Is it the color? Is it the shape? What does that look like?
Um, I think that I would say it's the style. And, they may be big fans of, one brand and really, and let's say they're a big supporter of that brand and now they're trying the collab. And so they're like, oh, well, this is really cool because I love CLA hats. Well, now they've got something going on with Puma, maybe I'll try Puma and see how that flows over or something. So I think there is definitely, and I would imagine that's one of the reasons that the companies want to do it is that they want the people who are interested in the other collaborator, they want those people to come and explore their brand. So I think it is a good way to sort of share between brands. And I suppose maybe from a design perspective, there might be some sharing of ideas as well, like creative ideas, which is probably cool for the creators for sure. So yeah, I think that I think people would support their favorite and then trust their favorite that is now in cahoots with somebody else. And I do definitely think that here is where influencers and that sort of thing I think really play a part as well.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of getting a proper coach if you're looking for training advice. But I think from a style perspective, that's one area where I do think influencers play a huge role. And it's fun that running shoes are not just for practical purposes, that they actually do have kind of a style and that they signal something about your running. They are a statement.
Yeah, they are definitely a statement. And I think, like, I was recently at a race directors conference where Race Roster gave some statistics. And they were saying that the biggest increase in participation is from women 18 to 28.
Interesting.
So I thought that was really interesting because with those with information like that, it really sort of turns you around to thinking about who you're selling to, right? Are you and certainly like as a store owner, it's something that I sorry. Something's beeping in my house. Can you hear it?
Yeah. Do you know what it is?
Okay, hold on a sec.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh. Okay. Sorry about that. That was kind of
That's
weird.
okay.
Okay, it was a timer on something.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Sorry.
Uh, do you remember where we were at?
Um, just about women 18 to 28. Yeah.
Yeah,
What I
okay.
was saying about how the way, yeah. So, and I was starting to say as a store owner, yeah. So when I look at statistics like that, and I think, okay, so women 18 to 28, those are the new runners. Those are making up the bulk of people coming into run clubs and races and that sort of thing. Catering to that audience is definitely very different than catering to someone who is 40 and above, or even 30, right? So, and there's no question that people make different choices, just in where they are in their lives, right? So if you're like, if you're, let's say in your 30s and you've got a young family and you're working and trying to manage it all, you just make different choices with your money, with the people you hang out with and the people that you're influenced by. And I mean, I'm 60, so I definitely make different choices. I wear longer tights. So I find for myself that I have to think about who is walking in through that door, and I might not, I'm really not on Instagram that often looking at influencers, but maybe I should spend more time. But I definitely have young people who work for me in the store and who run with our run club, and I ask them for their opinions on things. Like when I'm doing clothing buys, like what color, what should, would you wear this? Do you like this color? Would you do this? Would you do that? Because I don't think I should trust myself necessarily to make these decisions alone. And I think that's good. Like, once again, that's sort of like what we're going back to. That's collaboration, right? And just asking other creative people for their input into things.
Yeah, and it's great that the running space has been something that's it's so much more diverse in recent years. I think it used to be a very niche sport where everyone running it was going from marathon to marathon and putting in big mileage. And now you see people who are running for different reasons and have their own style. So it's nice to see that translate to gear as well. One thing we haven't gotten to today that I also want to make sure we include is related to your old gear. I think a lot of runners, especially winter stuff, it might start to pile up, or your spring gear you maybe haven't touched in a while. You don't know if
Yeah.
the shoe has any life in it or there's holes. How do you determine what stuff you need to replace, and what do you do with that old gear as people start to bring in new stuff for the spring?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that the brands are all trying to make themselves and their products more sustainable, for sure. So that may translate into a shoe that is it's not going to spend 20 years in a landfill kind of thing. It will just kind of like sort of disintegrate eventually. But there is no question that we do produce a lot of waste. I think for shoes, it is important, just in terms of replacing them, that we would typically say that those workhorses that I mentioned, the New Balance 880, the Brooks Ghost, the Saucony Ride, A6 Cumulus, any of those that are being made with like the EVA foams, are typically, good for about 800 kilometers. The other shoes in the other silo there that have the Piba foams, unfortunately, the life expectancy is, it's not nearly that long, maybe 500 kilometers or 600 kilometers. And it would really depend. Some of them even less, maybe. I can't speak totally to the Nike shoes because we don't carry them, but I definitely say that, some of them, I think, have like a 250 kilometer life expectancy. So
All the way to 26.2 miles for that Evo Pro, right?
That's right, yeah. So there's lots of opportunities to donate shoes, though, for sure. Like we take donations to the store, and we donate them to a local charity that is called the Common Table. It's a drop-in community program, and they always need shoes. So I'm sure that most people could find a charity locally that they could donate shoes to. And I think too, like, just my own personal feeling is that there's somebody local who wants those shoes. Like, I know that there's charities that send them overseas as well, but there's so many people there's a lot of need right here in our own local communities. So, I mean, sometimes I give away shoes just, like, we're on Bloor Street, and there are, unfortunately, a lot of people who, really do need a helping hand. And, I mean, sometimes I just give shoes right out of the store. I'll stop them and tell them that they need new shoes and give them, some of the donations that come in. So I think that definitely, like, I think everybody should just make a little bit of an effort to do something like that with the shoes. And if the shoes are worn, though, they're worn out, they have holes and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, they are garbage, but the brands, you could look at the different brands, but, On and Brooks, for example, really they have worked so hard on their sustainability stories. So, it sort of varies from shoe to shoe, but, if you wanted to do a little bit more research on that, you could take a look at their websites for that. But they have really, really, worked hard for that. As far as apparel is concerned, once again, there's just so many charities out there that want them. And I know for myself, like, I am constantly like recycling clothing. Like, even if you go to these different races and you get the race shirts, I think races are trying to now ask you if you want the shirt, right? And if you don't, then, it might make a little bit of a difference in your race registration, which I think is a really good idea, because I think races actually produce a lot of junk.
Yeah, the medal too, I think.
Yeah. So the medals, yeah. Although I think the medal's a little harder because at a finish line, like, everybody's like, they can't remember. Did I pick? Did I say no to a medal? Right? Like, that's a little bit more complicated. But the shirts, you get those when everybody's still sane at the kit pickup, right? So, yeah. Once again, I would say, just, if you don't want it anymore, then try and pass it on to a charity. There's just so many people there's just so much need out there, for sure. So, and I guess, to go back on a point that I made earlier, if you buy good quality apparel, you'll have it for a long time, right? I had called out a couple apparel lines there. Brooks, I know, people may not think it's like the coolest or in town or whatever, but they just make such good apparel. Brooks is a company that is exclusively run specialty, right? They are so dedicated to that, and they are always really striving to make the best running apparel. Not the coolest apparel, not the collab apparel, not the this, that, just run apparel. So that, and really, isn't that what it all, comes down to in the end? We just want to get out and go for a run, right? So, a company like Brooks, they make bras, they make, great clothes and stuff, clothes that'll last, and, you won't have to think too much about buying and you can save a couple pennies then to buy the really cool thing.
Yeah, no, there's no better feeling really than just having that good piece of gear that's going to last and make you feel good. And then while you're at it, if you have some extra old gear, being able to give it to somebody who's going to make good use of it. So
Yeah.
I think, great part of the spring season.
Absolutely, yeah. We had kind of a funny thing happen to us in one of the women in our run club. Her daughter went to like Value Village, which is like I'm not sure if there's Value Village in the States, but it's like a local charity clothing depot. And she actually found one of our old singlets for the run club so then she came to one of the races wearing it, which I thought was pretty funny actually. So it was like, what? People are giving away our singlets? But yeah.
I love that. Lynn, I could probably speak for hours and hours about shoes and apparel, but unfortunately, we only have so much time, so I might have to take some of it off air on the podcast. But thank you so much for joining me to talk
Oh, it's my
about all things
pleasure.
running.
Yes, thank you so much for asking me. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Loved having you on.
Thank you.